Believe it or not, whenever I post a Demon Slayer video, a lot of people still ask me in the comments, "Hey guy, what game is this?" Well, this is Demon Slayer Hinokami Chronicles, available for PlayStation, Xbox, PC, and very soon on the Nintendo Switch. And that comment is usually followed by, "So this is just Naruto Storm but with Demon Slayer, right?" Yeah, no, yeah? The debate on whether or not this game is just a copy of Storm I think has died down a little bit, but it still exists. However, the debate on whether this game is better or worse than Naruto Storm is just as strong as it always was. And when people ask me which one I think is better, I say that they're both good. It's up to their personal preference.
Which is the coward's way out.
So we're gonna use science today to determine which one is the better game. And if you want to find out together, make sure you're subscribed, because every time I say it, that number of non-subscribed viewers goes down in the analytics. So let's keep going. Double check if you're subbed, it's free and it helps me out a lot. So, Naruto Storm versus Demon Slayer. For the sake of this video, I'm gonna be using Storm 4 as a comparison, even though Storm itself is a series of 6 different games. There are many points where we can directly compare the two. Both have a story mode, both have offline versus, online versus, and some extra modes that might be worth talking about. And I want to be very clear about my bias from the very start. I love both of these games for very different reasons. But if you ask me which one I prefer, Demon Slayer. I don't even have to think about it. But if you ask me why I prefer Demon Slayer, my answer is gonna be, well, I like this aspect better or that aspect better, and that's very subjective. It just means that I like Demon Slayer more. It doesn't mean that Demon Slayer is better. So in this video, I'm trying to be as objective as possible while respecting both titles, because let's be honest, these are two of the best anime games ever made. And with that, let's start with story mode. Story mode in both games is very good. For Storm 4, it retells the final arc of Naruto Shippuden. Demon Slayer retells the story of Season 1 and the Mugen Train, and I like both story modes, but they both have their fair share of issues. The start of Storm 4 is really heavy with slideshows. If a game is retelling the events that we already watched in the anime, replaying them with a ton of slideshows is really not ideal. A slideshow here and there is fine, but Storm really has a lot of them from the start. The point of retelling events of the anime story in a video game is to give players a different perspective, whether that is to make the player relive those events while in control of the character, having direct control over the events that we watched on TV, or by reliving some epic moments now animated in beautiful in-game graphics, whether that is through simple cutscenes or QuickTime events. The issue goes away later in the story, as Storm actually animated the end of Naruto Shippuden before the anime even did, so it wasn't even an option to do slideshows there. Demon Slayer does not have this problem. While it does have a lot of slideshows too, these are memory fragments, which are used to complement non-essential parts of the story and are completely optional. All the main bits you need to relive the Demon Slayer story are either fully animated or playable, except for the ramen guy. He's very essential and he's only a slideshow. Gameplay-wise, Storm also features a lot more 1v1 encounters. These could just be recreated in versus mode. It also has its fair share of unique boss fights and encounters, but compared to Demon Slayer, a lot of its fights would be easy to recreate by picking the right characters and the right stage in versus. Demon Slayer ends up having more unique encounters, from minor demons to boss fights, making its story a lot more unique as well. Storm does have better events and boss fights in my opinion. The best moments of Storm story mode are indeed better than the best moments in Demon Slayer story, but it only has a few of them. So if I had to choose, I think I like Demon Slayer more. Any story that has fights that you could just recreate in versus ends up being a bit of a waste for me personally. In Demon Slayer, every single fight, with the exception of the tutorial with Sabito, is a fight that you would not be able to recreate in versus. It's got so many unique moments that I think even though Storm has a couple of cooler events, Demon Slayer as a whole delivers a better story mode in my opinion. Not by much, but it's the winner for me. They're roughly the same length as well, until you add Storm 4's adventure mode, and suddenly Storm just has a lot more hours of content. I don't think the content itself is very good. The running around in Storm is really tedious. The missions are either the most unimaginative fetch quests or they're just 1v1 battles, but it's always nice to see Konoha fully realized as a 3D space that you can look at and walk around in, the same way that it's nice to see all those spaces Demon Slayer gave us in story mode. But the running around is similar in both. It's not that much fun, doesn't add a lot to the experience, but since both stories were that close, I think adventure mode is gonna push Storm ahead. So purely from a content perspective, I'm gonna give story mode to Storm. Combat-wise, these games are not similar at all. Even though they are both arena fighters from the same developer, the philosophy and playstyles are completely different. Storm is a flashier game, much more cinematographic, big moves with a lot of special effects on screen, but characters also play mostly the same. The same inputs usually give you the same combos or tech. The difference between characters happens mostly on their assists and hitbox differences on their attack strings, but as far as move properties go, it's designed to be easy to pick up and play no matter the character you choose. Storm was developed as a single-player game first with a combat system tacked onto it, but a combat system that, despite having a lot of flaws as a competitive game, was able to thrive for a long time thanks to its community. On the other hand, Demon Slayer has had a more competitive focus from the very start. Versus mode does not feel like an afterthought, characters are a lot more unique in their movesets, and while the attack buttons mostly work the same, they come equipped with very unique skills that completely change the routes you should go for and the playstyle that each character prefers. It's not as easy to just pick up and play jumping from one character to another. To really get good at this game, you're gonna need to practice a character before jumping into a match. Nothing crazy like a traditional fighting game, but a lot more than Storm for sure. It does have a huge downside by comparison, which is the number of characters in the roster. Storm absolutely blows the 25 character roster of Demon Slayer out of the water. Well, 24 characters for now. Tengen will hopefully come out soon. There's something to be said about Storm's number, but let's not forget that this is the 6th Storm game. They've had a lot of time to build up on it. In fact, if you look back at the first Storm game, it also had 25 characters in total. And given how much more unique each character's moveset is in Demon Slayer, I find that more of an impressive start, even if 8 of those Demon Slayer characters are kind of duplicates. So the real roster is actually 17. It's still more impressive than the first Storm. Characters aside, as a fighting game, Demon Slayer is much more my preference. With how Storm never got balanced after release, with how much you need to adjust the rules and ban characters to make the game competitively fun, Storm is not a game that lends itself well to this kind of gameplay. It's through sheer willpower and passion for the Naruto series that people have made it competitive. And that is not to say that this is a party game or that there isn't a lot to learn. At the end of the day, the better player will win. There's a lot of tech to discover. But at its very core, I find the game as a versus game, as a competitive game that you test your skills against another player, just to be very flawed. Take how strong jumping around is and time wasting, which was definitely a problem in Demon Slayer and it quickly got fixed. It's got other issues now, but that one's gone. And just how many times you can sub out of a combo. You can make the same mistake 4 times in a row and you won't get punished because you got 4 subs. So it becomes a game about resource management and baiting the opponent's choices. Thing is, this is a really fast game and a lot of those baits are gonna be guesses. I guess he's gonna sub here, so I'm gonna bait it. You could also call that a read. Some players are that predictable, but to me, that's just not as satisfying as punishing someone who did a dumb mistake with the biggest combo I've been able to lab. And Demon Slayer also has its own form of escape, but you only get one every 15 seconds. Maybe less if you want to spend some resources to boost or surge, but even then, way less than Storm. The speed of the game is also slower, which allows not only for reads, but also reactions and a bit more calculated counterplay. So as a whole, the combat system in Demon Slayer is something that I prefer far more. That said, let's not forget about the characters. Storm has more than 100 characters. Even if only a handful of them are used frequently, that's still a lot. So as a versus game, I would totally accept if you told me that you prefer Storm 4 over Demon Slayer. If you value the number of characters that much, I also value a big roster, but only if each character brings a unique playstyle, and it just feels like a lot of the Storm characters are duplicates. So many of these characters just fill the exact same roles as others. There are unique characters, you have the zoners, you have the puppeteers, but a lot of them don't feel that unique, or at least not as unique as Demon Slayer, and the basics of combat, Demon Slayer is just much, much better. Moving on to online. They're both bad. There's no sugarcoating this, they're terrible. CyberConnect 2 does not make good online experiences. Both games have delay-based netcode. Storm, despite having so many games in the series, never fixed or improved their netcode at all. If you played someone who lived nearby, the game played fine, but it was just terrible at handling long distances and variable network conditions. Not only did the delay get unbearable really fast, the game would often freeze and stutter unless you were playing under ideal conditions. In Demon Slayer, they finally tried something new, which on one hand was great to see them try, but they still failed miserably. The connection is usually a lot more stable, the netcode is able to handle a wider range of conditions, but say you're playing someone who lives right next to you, the game adds a ton of delay as a basis to provide for that stability. Even then, there are multiple cases that show the game desyncing, meaning each player will be playing a different game, which is especially serious in one of the stages. So both games are bad at doing this, but Storm is ultimately better. Not because of the netcode, but because you can do more online. Not only do you have ranked and casual matches, you can also make a lobby with friends and spectate their games while you wait for your turn, something that's not present at all in Demon Slayer. I don't want to say that Storm is the better game because that doesn't feel fair, I just think it's the one that's less bad. Now, those are obviously the 3 big pillars of arena fighters: story mode, offline versus, and online versus. But on top of this, games usually bring some extras. Storm has a tournament mode if you want another way of experiencing versus matches. Demon Slayer, on the other hand, has this completely fairly useless set of challenges called Training Mode, which is just a series of battles with the same optional objectives, copy and pasted for every character. I don't think the extra content is great in either game, but I think once again, Storm is the least bad of the two. Which brings us to the conclusion of this video. If you can only buy one of these games and you want both, it is up to personal preference which one you buy. If you're looking for a multiplayer experience, Demon Slayer is the way to go. Not only because I think it has a better combat system, it's also the more recent game, so it's going to be more populated and there are a lot more tournaments happening. That said, if you want to get the most bang for your buck, or you're buying the game on Xbox or Nintendo Switch where the tournament scene isn't that big, then maybe Storm is the way to go. The game wins by the sheer amount of content it has. But the number one idea that I perhaps wanted to convey with this video is that I do not see Demon Slayer as a step down from Storm at all, because I don't see Demon Slayer as a sequel to Storm 4. Storm was a series that had 6 games in total building upon each other, so a more fair comparison would be perhaps the first Storm game, a game with an absolutely terrible story mode, no online features, and the same number of characters. And while I think technically Storm 4 is a better game objectively than Demon Slayer is a much stronger start to a series, and I honestly cannot wait to see how they build it up from here. But that's just my opinion. What do you guys think? I've pretty much had this entire discussion by myself. I'd love to hear it from you. Which game do you prefer? Let me know in the comments. And as always, thank you very much for watching. My name is Globku, and I'll see you next time. Bye!